Okay, so today our focus is matrix equations. We'll be solving matrix equations. And when we do this, we're going to be using something similar to our augmented matrix. It's a little bit different in that you don't put the row of constants in the matrix. Okay, so it's the coefficients of x, y, and z, and then you multiply it by x, y, z. And then we know it has to be equal to 750. Okay, so we can verify this using multiplication. And if we let our matrices equal A, X, and B, so the first one would be A, this one would be X, the last one would be B. Then our matrix equation can be written as A times X is equal to B, where A is called the coefficient matrix. Okay, and we are going to solve this by multiplying each side by the inverse of A. Okay, so the notation is A with our -1. Okay, and of course the inverse would have to exist in this case. So we're going to solve this matrix equation for x below. So this is going to take into account some of the things that we did yesterday. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply each side by the inverse. So if you do that, it has to be on the same side, which means if I multiply by the inverse on the left here, when I multiply on this side, it also has to be on the left. And then from there, we can use the associative property, which does hold true for matrices, which lets me multiply the inverse by A. From yesterday, do you guys remember what that's going to be equal to? If you multiply an inverse by the matrix, what do you get? The identity matrix. So in this case, your A is a 3 by 3. So this would be the identity matrix for a 3 by 3. Okay, and then when you multiply anything by the identity, you get the same thing. So if you multiply the identity by x, you get x is equal to the inverse times b. So we remember that you have to multiply on the left, okay, by the inverse, since we know that multiplication is not commutative. Okay, so what that means is if you're doing the A inverse times A of x, that would not be equal to doing B times the A inverse on the right side. Okay, so a lot of times, like in algebra, when we multiply things by both sides, that's what we do. We put one on this side, one on the other. You can't. So if this is on the left, this is on the right, they are not equal. Okay, so we are going to solve the matrix equation given by the system above. Okay, so we're going to do this first by hand, and then we're going to do it by calculator. So on your day 2 homework, you'll have sum of each. So this is 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. We can just add that on if you guys want to just put that on there instead of writing the whole matrix, that's fine. So in order to solve the equation, okay, we solve this. This is what we're going to do. We're going to find the inverse, and then we're going to multiply by b. So if we find the inverse, we're using our skills from earlier in chapter 10. Okay, so we always want to get a 1 in the upper right corner. Now that we have that, we can just do the opposite. So we want this to be a 0. So what should I multiply row 1 by? Why don't you guys write it down and then I'll call on one of you to tell me what our equation is. Okay, so we're going to multiply something by row 1 and then let's see what our equation will be. Okay, so Anya, what'd you get for your equation?
I got you multiply row 1 by -2.
Yes, and then we're going to put that result in row 2. Okay, so why don't you guys go ahead and do that right now if you haven't already. There are less fractions today. Hallelujah. And then after you got your row 2, see if you can do your row 3. All right, and then Jaden C, once you have row 2, you just tell me what you got. Two, 1, 0, yes. Okay, and then in the same step, now you can get row 3. So you want this to be a 0 as well. So we should be doing 3 times row 1 plus row 3. That's going to be row 3. Okay, so take a minute if you need to. And then Harrison, once you have row 3, we let me know what you get. And then this one should be a 0. Yeah, I should do 0 plus 0. All right, and then look, we have 1, 0, 0, a 1 and a 0. So all we have to do now is get that 0 above. So you always want to take that leading 1 and use that to get the 0 here. So we're going to do the opposite of -2. So 2 times row 2. We're going to add that to row 1. We're going to put that in row 1. Okay, and you can decide if you want to write the other rows in first or last. All right, and then Nina, when you have that first row, you let me know what you got. Okay, you got 1, 0, 0, -3. You said you got 0, 0. Let's check. Yeah, 2 and 0. Yeah, great. Okay, so we have the 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1. Zoa, what do we want to get next?
A 1.
Yep, a 1. Yep. So then let's just multiply all of that row by a third. So 1/3 times row 3. Like I said, sometimes I like to organize it first and then do my last row. Okay, so anything times 0 is going to be 0. Multiply by the reciprocal to get 1. You have another 3 there, so there's another 1, 0, and then 1/3. All right, only one more thing left to do. We gotta get that 2 into a 0. Okay, so we'll multiply row 3 by the opposite. So we'll multiply row 3 by -2. We will add that to row 2. We will put the result in row 2. Okay, so -2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 0, 0. Okay, 0 plus 1, 1. -2 plus 2, 0. Okay, -2 minus 2, what should I put here? -4. Okay, and then I have times 0, so 0 plus 1, 1. -2 times 1/3 plus 0, -2/3. So then what you have now is I3 on this side. On this side, you have the inverse. Okay, so we're going to use that in our next step. So our inverse of A is -3, 2, 0, -4, 1, -2/3, 1, 0, 1/3. All right, so after you find the inverse, now we're going to multiply that by matrix B. Okay, so we are going to do the inverse times B. Okay, so our inverse, -3, 2, 0, -4, 1, -2/3, 1, 0, 1/3. And we're going to multiply that by B. Okay, so B is 7, 5, 0. Okay, and that just comes from here. This is your B matrix, the 7, 5, 0 right here. Okay, so we're going to multiply this. Remember, if you have a 3 by 3 and a 3 by 1, your result is going to be a what? 3 by 3 and a 3 by 1, your result will be a 3 by 1. Okay, so your result is going to be a matrix. Okay, so we're going to do the first row times the first column. Then we're going to do the second row times the first column because there's only one column. The third row times the first column. Okay, so -3 times 7, -21 plus 10. And then once you see that last one's a 0, you can just write that down. Okay, so -4 times 7, -28. Then we do 1 times 5. And then the last one would be times 0, so it's 0. And then 1 times 7, 0 times 5, 1/3 times 0. Okay, so I get negative 11, negative 23, and 7. So that's going to be my solution. Okay, so this matrix is your solution here. Okay, so what we just did is we proved that the matrix equation AX equals B can be solved by the following method. So if you have a square matrix, it has to be the square n by n, and it has an inverse, okay, then you can find the solution by using X equals the inverse matrix times B. Okay, and again, we know that that is not commutative. So even when we're doing this on our calculator, the order that you're multiplying in is going to matter. Because if you don't multiply it like this, if you try to do the matrix B times A inverse, okay, then you would get an error. Okay, so the next one we're going to do with our calculator. So you have a system of equations given. So the first thing we're going to do is write the system of equations as a matrix equation. So that was done for you on the first page. Now we are going to practice that ourselves. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the coefficients. So if you want, you can do the coefficients of x, or you can go straight across, but there's no x in the first one. So we know it starts with 0. Coefficient of x, 3, and then 1. Coefficients of y, -2, 1, -2. Coefficients of z are 2, 3, 3. Okay, so that is your first matrix. Okay, the system of equations is going to give you another matrix. It's your x, y, z, and that is going to be equal to the constants. So 12, -2, and 8. Okay, so this is the matrix equation system. You have A times X is equal to B. Okay, so we're going to solve the system, okay, but we are going to write out what we are doing. So we are going to do A inverse times B. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the A inverse. We're going to do that with our calculator. Okay, so you guys might have your matrices in there from yesterday. If you want to go to 2nd plus 712, it will reset those matrices. You can also just edit them when you go into the matrix. Okay, and then we're going to go to edit. Okay, and matrix A is right here. So it's a 3 by 3. Let's go ahead and put that in. So we have 0, -2, 2, 3, 1, 3, and then 1, -2, 3. Okay, so we'll check to make sure we have all the right numbers. That is our matrix A. Okay, and then if we want to find the inverse, okay, we're just going to go to quit, and then you have to get the matrix A back, and then do you guys know which button is the inverse button? It's what the matrix is above. So you have this x to the -1. So if you go to second matrix, press enter, so you have the matrix of A on your home screen. Then you can use this inverse button, okay, and then press enter, and poof, there it is. There's your inverse. So -4.5, -1, and 4, and 3, 1, -3. Okay, and then, did I say 4, 1, 3.5, 1, -3. Okay, and now we're going to multiply that by B. So we have to enter in B. Don't clear that out because I'll show you how you can use your answer. Okay, so your matrix of B is 12, -2, 8. Okay, so if you do clear it out, you can always do the A inverse back and then do times B. Okay, so we're going to have to enter in B. So we're going to go over to edit, go down to B. B is a 3 by 1. So we have 12, -2, and 8. And then once you have that in there, you can go back to your home screen. If you just want to press times, it will give you that answer. Okay, and like I said, if you accidentally clear it out, you can always do the A inverse again, and then go back to the matrix to do times B. Okay, and then that is your solution. So your solution is x equals -20, 10, 16. Okay, so that's going to be your final answer there. Okay, so I made this before I switched a few things. So I am only giving you 2 problems by hand, and then the rest will be by calculator. So I'm going to put up the calendar so you can see that. So I know that says just 30 and 33 and 34. You can use your calculator. There's going to be more problems that you can use your